China's massive global lending spree has been sold to the world as the developing nation rescue mission, a Belt and Road spectacle, a grand strategy aimed at Africa, Asia, and Latin America. But a bombshell study now blows that entire narrative to pieces. The United States, yes, the same country that warns everyone else about Chinese debt traps, has secretly been the biggest beneficiary of Chinese loans for 2 whole decades. More than $200 billion, nearly 2,500 covert and not-so-covert projects, funding everything from pipelines to tech takeovers to LNG terminals on American soil. The world thought Beijing was bankrolling ports in Sri Lanka, but in reality, it was bankrolling America. So how did the US become China's top borrower while lecturing the world about Chinese influence? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. For years, Washington wagged its finger at nations tempted by Chinese credit, accusing Beijing of predatory lending, asset seizures, and debt trap diplomacy. The US told Africa to be careful, Asia to resist, Europe to stay vigilant. But quietly, discreetly, and strategically, the United States itself was taking in billions, and not just for harmless corporate cash flow, but for critical assets, strategic minerals, and high-tech companies aligned with China's national security ambitions. How did the superpower warning others about Chinese loans become the world's biggest recipient of them? Over the past 2 decades, Chinese official lenders, state-owned banks, sovereign enterprises, and government-backed financiers poured $2.2 trillion into over 200 countries, reshaping the global financial landscape. The assumption was always that these loans targeted struggling nations, countries needing cheap cash for ports, power grids, dams, railways, and Belt and Road mega projects. But the new aid data study flips this idea upside down. It reveals that China's lending focus has dramatically shifted, with more than 3/4 of it now going to upper middle and high income countries. That means the world's richest economies, the US, the UK, Germany, Australia, and major EU states, became the true center of China's credit empire. This wasn't charity, this was strategy. Beijing wasn't chasing goodwill, it was chasing leverage. And in that high-income club, America stands at the very top. The US received more than $200 billion across nearly 2,500 activities, each one carefully threaded into the American economic bloodstream. China backed LNG export terminals in Texas and Louisiana, financed airport terminals in New York and Los Angeles, supported pipelines including major oil routes, and even extended liquidity lines to America's biggest corporations: Amazon, AT&T, Verizon, Tesla, Ford, General Motors, Boeing, Disney. These Fortune 500 giants dipped into Chinese-backed credit pools, often through syndicates of international banks, where Chinese lenders quietly held a slice of influence. These weren't concessional loans to help poor nations. These were strategic injections into the world's most advanced economy. But infrastructure wasn't the end game. China used its financial firepower to burrow into America's technological core. State-backed loans helped Chinese firms acquire key US tech players over the years: semiconductor specialist OmniVision Technologies, automation powerhouse Paslin Company, and electronics giant Ingram Micro. Financial influence doesn't require ownership. It requires presence. It requires entanglement. It requires interdependence. Beijing understands this, and for years, the US didn't. Now the script is flipped. The West is scrambling. Washington is trying to build its own lending machine. Europe is trying to fortify its investment screening. The G7 is trying to reverse engineer a system China perfected over decades. Because the real revelation of this study is simple. While the world debated ports in Sri Lanka, Beijing built a financial empire inside the world's richest economies, with the United States standing at the very top. And the world's biggest borrower now has to answer something very uncomfortable. How did China quietly become the banker of the American century?